Good afternoon. My name is George Svinis and I'm an Engagement Manager at Standards Australia. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on ISO IEC 27001, arguably the world's best known standard for information security management systems. Before we go much further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we meet today. For me here in Sydney, it's the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders, both past and present, both here and from wherever you are tuning in from today. It's important to give you a disclaimer that the information we're providing today is given to you for educational purposes. The information is not formal advice. You should seek independent professional advice before acting or relying on the information. I'd also like to give you some information today regarding our distribution partners. You'll see them listed here on the screen. Our distribution partners are where you can come to purchase the standard, including 27001 and any other standards referenced today. In terms of questions, you can scan the QR code on your screen and submit any questions through Slido. We will have an opportunity for a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Anna Harris. Anna is a Principal Advisor Information Security within the Office of the Victorian Information Commissioner. Anna has worked with OVIC and the former offices of the Commissioner for Privacy and Data Protection and the Commissioner for Law Enforcement Data Security for the past 10 years, leading the delivery of the first regulated information security regime across the Victorian Government. Anna is also the chair of the Standards Australia Committee MB25 Security and Resilience and a member of the Standards Australia Committee IT12 on information security, cybersecurity and privacy protection, the latter committee being the one that has formally adopted ISO IEC 27001 and made it an Australian standard. It's with great pleasure that I now hand over to Anna. Anna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, George, and thank you everyone for joining us today to look at the updated NZS ISO IEC 27001 2023 Information Security Management Systems requirements. I'll refer to it as 27001 for short throughout this presentation because it is quite a long name. Today, we're going to be covering what 27001 is, its relationship to the other 27000 series standards, the content of 27001, the key changes in the latest version, and for those of you who are interested in implementing an information security management system, we'll finish off with some pointers on where to start. So as a member of the Standards Australia Committee IT12, Information Security, Cybersecurity and Privacy Protection that George mentioned, I was privileged to be part of the review of 27002 Information Security Controls, which is the supporting detailed standard to 27001. So it made sense to keep in step with the updates by making sure that 27001 was also updated after 27002 was published, given they are closely interlinked. The 2023 Australian version supersedes previous versions, such as the 2015 Australian adoption of the 2013 ISO version, including related corrigendum. So, what is 27001? 27001 establishes an Information Security Management System, or ISMS for short. It provides organisations of any size and from all sectors with guidance for establishing, implementing, maintaining and continually improving an ISMS. 27001 promotes a holistic approach to information security covering all security domains, from developing policies, so your governance, to vetting people, human resources and all that, and implementing physical and technology controls. An information security management system implemented according to the standard is a tool for managing information security risks and has the following benefits: maintaining the confidentiality, integrity and availability of information, resilience to cyber attacks, preparedness for new threats, organisation-wide protection, and a considered and systematic approach to provide cost efficiencies. It's meant to be applicable across all the industries. It is neutral to application and industry. It also means that certain industries may wish to create additions to the standard which are specific to their domain and to suit their particular context. And I'll give you some examples as we go through the presentation. 27001 is a management system standard, an MSS, and it is based on the ISO Harmonized Management System Standard Annex SL, which means that it follows the same format as other management systems. So if you're familiar with other management system standards like 9001 Quality Management System Standard, you'll find much in common. 27001 is structured in a manner to enable conformity assessment to be undertaken for those wishing to be 27001 certified. So as with other ISO management system standards, organisations implementing 27001 can decide whether they want to go through a certification process. Some organisations choose to implement the standard in order to benefit from the best practice it contains, while others also want to get certified to reassure customers and clients. Conformity to 27001 means that an organisation or business has put in place a system to manage risks related to the security of information owned or handled by the organisation, and that this system respects all the best practices and principles enshrined in the standard. Certification to 27001 is one way to demonstrate to stakeholders and customers that you are committed and able to manage information securely. Holding the certificate from an accredited conformity assessment body may bring an additional layer of confidence, and as the accreditation body has provided independent confirmation of the certification body's competence. The Australian version of 27001 is an identical adoption of its international equivalent, ISO IEC 27001 2022. And you may hear me refer to 2023 version, 2022 versions interchangeably. It's because they are identical, except one, which is 2022, is the international version, and 2023 is the Australian adoption. We tried to get it in straight afterwards. This version is a joint adoption between Australia and New Zealand. And as George mentioned, you can get a copy of the standard from any of your distribution partners. And hopefully, by having an Australian version, the distribution partners are more readily available for Australian organisations. So, I know, busy slide. How does 27001 relate to other documents in the 27000 series? The international version of 27001 and other standards in the family have been developed by the ISO IEC Joint Technical Committee, JTC1, or more precisely, its Subcommittee 27, Information Security, Cybersecurity and Privacy Protection, which our Standards Australia Committee, IT12, mirrors. The following are helpful references when you start to look at implementing an ISMS, and there are so many. So I've only listed a fraction of what's available, and I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but let's start at the top. It's a good place to start with 27000. This provides an overview of information security management systems, or ISMS, and it provides terms and definitions commonly used in the ISMS family of standards. And by the way, 27000 is one of a number of ISO standards which is publicly available to download for free. So enjoy. Next is our standard, 27001, which is, as George mentioned, the world's best-known standard for information security management systems and their requirements. So together with other standards in the 27000 series, they enable organisations of all sectors and sizes to manage the security of all types of information assets, such as financial, legal, personal, policy information, intellectual property, including information entrusted by third parties. Next, to support 27001 is 27002. And while 27001 outlines the requirements for an ISMS, 27002 offers best practices and control objectives related to key security aspects to consider when implementing an ISMS. Examples of controls may be access controls, cryptography, human resources security, and incident response, just to name a couple. And I will name a few more as we progress through the presentation. This standard serves as a practical blueprint for organizations aiming to effectively safeguard their information assets against threats. By following 27002 guidelines, organizations can take a proactive approach to information security risk management and protect critical information from unauthorized access and loss. Now, I mentioned earlier that 27001 is generic and applicable to all and can be taken by other areas to create sector or topic-specific implementation guidance. So 2 examples of where this has been done is 27019 and 27701. So 27019, information security controls for the energy utility industry, are the extension to the generic ISMS and provides sector-specific guidance. 27019 provides guidance based on 27002 applied across process control systems used by the energy utility industry for controlling and monitoring the production or generation, transmission, storage, and distribution of electric power, gas, oil, and heat, and for the control of associated supporting processes. 27701, extension to 27001 and 27002 for privacy information management, specifies requirements and provides guidance for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving a privacy information management system, PIMS. Standards like 27005, guidance on managing information security risks, provides foundational concepts and guidance to assist organizations to fulfill the requirements of 27001 concerning actions to address information security risks and perform information security risk management activities such as risk assessment and risk treatment. Now, risk assessment and risk management in general is the basis for these standards and follows the well-established risk management standard 31000. It's the nature of the risks that will be specific to information security for organizations to consider. There are other standards in this series that are particular to certification, including competences of testers. 27021 specifies the requirements of competence for ISMS professionals leading or involved in establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving one or more information security management system processes that conforms to 27001. And there's a list of technical specifications not listed on this slide that assist with implementation, including 27008 guidelines for the assessment of information security controls, 27006 requirements for bodies providing audit and certification of information security management systems. So we're going to spend a bit of time going through the contents of the document to get those of you who are unfamiliar and understanding of the layout and coverage. And I will quote directly from the document throughout this presentation so you can also become familiar with the language used. And for those of you who are well versed in this standard, I will highlight the changes from this version shortly. So the body of the document, clauses 1 to 10, span 10 pages. So it's not a very long document. And then Annex A, which lists the 27002 controls, takes the next 7 pages. The document starts off with scope in clause 1, it's a good place to start, and reads as, the requirements set out in this document are generic and are intended to be applicable to all organizations regardless of type, size, or nature. And then there is a list of normative references, terms, and definitions. Then clause 4, context of the organization, covers key areas for the organization to consider, including understanding the organization, understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties, determining the scope of the ISMS. Clause 5, leadership, covers both leadership commitment, policy, and roles and responsibilities. Clause 6, planning, is the focus of the document and covers how to effectively implement an ISMS using a risk approach. This includes information security risk assessment, all the way from defining the risk criteria through to identifying, analysing, and evaluating information security risks, information security risk treatment, such as selecting the appropriate treatment, determining relevant controls, and this is where you use Annex A to assist, producing a statement of applicability, formulating a risk treatment plan, and gaining the appropriate acceptance of the risks. Establishing an information security objectives for the organisation and how to achieve these include how to plan for change in the future. Clause 7, support, covers the areas to consider when developing, implementing, and maintaining an ISMS, including resources, competence, awareness, communication, documentation. Clause 8, operation, is pretty self-explanatory. It basically says, you know, the things you said you were going to do in planning, go do them and then keep doing them. So it basically operationalizes Clause 6. Clause 9, performance evaluation, speaks to the what, who, when, and how of monitoring and measuring performance for success. For example, what needs to be monitored and measured? How are you going to monitor, measure, analyse, and evaluate to ensure valid results? When the monitoring and measuring shall be performed? Who shall monitor and measure? When the results from monitoring and measurement shall be analysed and evaluated? Who shall analyse and evaluate these results? It also goes on to talk about audit requirements, including internal audit and management reviews. And for those of you who are familiar with management system standards, it should come as no surprise that the final clause in 27001 is related to continuous improvement. Clause 10 covers reviewing the ISMS to ensure it's fit for purpose. And then also in terms of audit, it discusses non-conformance and corrective actions. Let's talk about Annex A. So the second half of the document, as I mentioned, takes time to list Annex A. So the information security controls listed in Table A1 of Annex A are directly derived from and aligned with those listed in 27002/2022, clauses 5 to 8, and shall be used in context with 6.1.3 information security risk treatment. The list currently has 93 controls. That's a lot, all covering all security domains, including organizational, people, physical, and technological controls. And don't worry, I'm not going to list all 93 controls, but some examples, for example, organizational controls. This includes policies, roles and responsibilities, asset management, including inventory of assets, classification, and labeling of information and return of assets, identity and access management, supplier relationships, incident management, privacy, records management. People controls cover the life cycle of engagement from pre-employment screening through to providing staff with relevant training and awareness, remote working, responsibilities after termination of employment. Physical controls include securing the premises, monitoring, clear desk and screen, securing assets off-site, storage media, cabling security, equipment maintenance, secure disposal and reuse. Technological controls include securing endpoint devices, privileged access management, capacity management, configuration management, change management, vulnerability management, backups, login and monitoring, network security, cryptography, application security, secure development lifecycle. It's a lot, I know, but it is also helpful to go through the list and see that securing information does not stop at implementing a new technology. There are other considerations to think about, and ideally a business-wide approach. And we'll talk about implementation shortly. Let's talk about the key changes from this version to the previous. And the first one we'll cover is alignment with the harmonized MSS structure, or management system standard structure. There are a number of changes to the main management system clauses, but the vast majority of these are focused on making some of the requirements more explicit and aligning better with other Annex SL standards, such as 9001, 22301. This common approach defined in the Annex SL will be useful for those organisations that choose to operate a single management system that meets the requirements of 2 or more management system standards. This way, organisations wishing to implement the MSS will be familiar with the high-level structure, identical subclause titles and text, common terms, and core definitions defined in Annex SL of ISO IEC Directives Part 1 Consolidated ISO Supplement to maintain compatibility with other management system standards that have adopted the Annex SL format. So just to give you 4 examples of the type of MSS changes we're talking about, because there are a few, I'm not going to go through all of them. Clause 4.4 in the 2015 version stated, 4.4, Information Security Management System. The organisation shall establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve an information management security management system in accordance with the requirements of this international standard. This current version, it starts the same. So the organisation shall establish, implement, maintain, and continually improve an ISMS. And then it adds, including the processes needed and their interactions in accordance with the requirements of this document. So the inclusion reflects the need to ensure the smooth transition between different processes and focuses on the interaction between processes and the handover from one to another. Clause 6.3, planning of changes, is a new subclause and mirrors the introduction to ISO 9001 in 2015. So this new addition states, under 6.3, planning of changes. When the organisation determines the need for changes to the ISMS, the changes shall be carried out in a planned manner. So here, you'll need to consider factors such as the purpose of the change and the potential consequences, how it may impact your ISMS, the availability of resources, and the allocation or reallocation of responsibilities and authorities. Clause 9.3 has been restructured in terms of formatting into 3 subclauses. It starts off with 9.3.1, which is a general subclause. Then 9.3.2 is management review inputs, which also includes the introduction of a new point, point C, and the rest of the points are pushed down by 1 alpha point. And this relates to considering interested parties in your management review, and states, C, changes in needs and expectations of interested parties are relevant to the information security management system. So here, you'll need to think about how you'll be able to monitor and review these needs and expectations and evidence that you have done so. And you may very well ask, why didn't they just add the new point at the end of the list? But this is because it logically fits in the middle and not after all the other actions have been completed, because the final point in the list is about opportunities for improvement. And the last 2 sentences in the previous version of clause 9.3 were placed into their own subsections. So 9.3.3, management review results, with the wording essentially the same with minor nuances. So where 2015 stated the organisation shall retain documented information as evidence of the results of management reviews, the latest version states documented information shall be available as evidence of the results of management reviews. So minor wording tweaks. And clause 10, improvement, the subsections have been reordered. So they've just been swapped. So 10.1 now being continual improvement and 10.2 becoming non-conformity and corrective action. But the content is identical. And there are other minor wording and formatting changes to harmonise the standard with Annex SL that I won't go through, unless, of course, you need me to. So the next key change and the most exciting change is the wholesale adoption of the controls from the latest release of 27002. And as such, if you're already certified to 27001, this should be your focus as you start to think about transitioning over to the new standard. Now, the controls are grouped into 4 themes that we covered previously, rather than the 14 categories they used to have. And this thing called attributes has been introduced to enable organizations to reflect their security posture considering different criteria. So one of these is looking at a control through the lens of whether the control assists in protecting the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of the asset. Or another attribute is looking at it in terms of whether it is a preventive, detective, or corrective control. All very useful when you're looking at your security risks. So if you've got a confidentiality risk, unauthorized access to information, then you might want to group confidentiality controls and take a look at those in the first instance for that particular risk. And the kind of controls that best suit the risk. So I'm not going to go into 27002 in any depth. And George, maybe it's, a webinar for another day, but it is 166 pages of fun. So I'll leave it be. And with regards to the controls themselves, as we said, there were 93 rather than the previous 114. And on first glance, this appears as though there's been a reduction in the number of controls in this version. However, a number of these have been consolidated, and there's actually 11 new controls and no deletions. So, lastly, in terms of change, there is one coming. So keep an eye out for an amendment, which will be to add a new statement to clause 4 related to considering climate action change in support of the ISO London Declaration on Climate Change. So stay tuned. So in the time that remains, let's look at where do you start with all this. It can be overwhelming and it's not easy. And as with any piece of new work, project or program, I'm going to say context is key. So you'll need to spend some time scoping what the ISMS will and will not include. And this will need to include consideration of an understanding of the organisation. So are you in a single location or geographically dispersed? And if you are dispersed, is it in different jurisdictions with differing legislation? And how big is the organisation? Who are your interested parties? And will you want to apply the ISMS across the entire business or just one or two areas? And just as a little side note, this scope is key whenever anyone tells you that they're 27001 certified. The first question you should ask is, what is the scope of that certification? Because it may not apply to the entire organisation. So take, for example, you are looking at entering into a new arrangement with a cloud service provider. And they're saying they're 27001 certified. Great. It may not be for the service you're seeking to utilize. It may be for some other service that they offer or for some other location where the data is stored or something not that you're looking to use. So make sure you take the time to check the scope. There's also an important piece around establishing the security structure. So that it needs to be adequately resourced to enable the coordination of security activities. And I know it sounds obvious, but I'm going to go there. Security is not the job just for the security team. It is everyone's responsibility. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're not trying to protect the security team's information. It's the organization's information. So the information owners and custodians need to take the lead in protecting their information. Executive leadership, commitment, and investment is required from the outset, as well as supporting governance structure, define roles and responsibilities, and good documentation. So we've got our scope. Next is all about your information. So once you know which part of the organisation the ISMS will apply to, let's look at what information the business has. And this will include not only information it generates, but also information obtained, received, or held by the organisation, and information in any format. So it may not only be electronic information, depending on your scope. So it's important to know your information assets. So once you know what information you're looking to protect, it's time to identify, assess, and treat the associated risks to that information, including understanding the business impacts, so the consequences if that information was compromised, and then the likelihood of the information being compromised. This will include going through the list of controls in 27002 and determining the statement of applicability to assist with identifying what controls are already in place and what controls should be in place to treat the risks. And a prioritization, because at the end of the day, you can't do everything all at once, so you'll need to put a plan in place. So they are the starting pieces. What follows is the ongoing management piece. And as with any risk management process, the key is managing your risks ongoing, which also goes to the next point, which is that it's not a set and forget exercise. So invest in reviewing your risks to make sure they're still valid. So ask, is the business still handling that piece of information? Has it changed from being managed from one third party to another? Has the information format or the way the information is handled changed in terms of processes used? Has the information gone from being handled in hard copy to being digitized and on an ICT system? Or has there been a new technology solution or application upgrade to from an existing system? And if any of these have happened, are there any new potential risks that we need to assess? What changes are required to the existing risks? Does their likelihood or consequence change, as well as the corresponding planned treatments or controls? And in terms of existing controls, are they operating effectively? So an effectiveness test will be required as well. Needless to say, there's an ongoing life cycle for this exercise. And this not only includes the review of risks, but also the review of the ISMS itself to make sure it's still fit for purpose and the scope is still right. So we go back to the beginning. And if you're in the business of having your ISMS certified, you will need to maintain the certification. So this is part of a normal review cycle. I know we've covered a lot, but I do hope you got something out of this. With that, George, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much for that, Anna. We do have some questions coming in. So I'll start with the first question, which is, can an organisation implement 27001 without getting formal certification?
Yes. So you can certainly follow it. As you know, both you and I both mentioned, it is best practice. It is globally well known. So you can certainly implement it without needing to get formal certification. Formal certification, as I mentioned, is something that you can do, that you can show to your stakeholders or customers that, you know, you've gone and had it independently reviewed and ticked off. So it is something that you can put as a badge, but you do not have to get certified, no.
Thank you. We'll go to the next one, which is, why should an organisation consider adopting ISO 27001 instead of or in addition to the ASD Essential 8?
So the ASD Essential 8 is just one. So it's just one part of security information. It is technology focused and it's very much Microsoft focused. It doesn't talk about other systems and it doesn't talk about verbal information. It doesn't talk about hard copy information. So it's just one specific focus area. And yes, whilst there's been research done that it does mitigate a high percentage of threats, it is just one aspect to consider. So it is a good starting point. I'm not going to deny that, but it is not as holistic as 27001 that looks at all security domains.
Great, thanks, Anna. What advice do you have for SMEs looking to implement 27001?
So I think the key for SMEs is to get an understanding of the information in the organisation. I think you've got to start there, because then otherwise you don't know what you're protecting. You can't just go and put in a whole heap of controls without understanding what is it you're trying to protect. So I'm going to say the key is to have a discussion with the business and see what information they have, and then what value it is to the business. So then you can prioritize efforts. And if you can, and I think this is key, you can't do it without executive buy-in. So you've got to have a conversation with the top, try and get them to understand, and, even ask the questions, what makes them, what keeps them awake at night, and make sure you try and prioritize those efforts. So I'm going to say, try and talk to the business, know what your information is, and get executive buy-in.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Anna. Quick question here. Did you say the 27000 series standards with 27002? That's just come off my screen there.
Free. Yes. Available for free. Yes. So no, 27000, which is the overview and the vocabulary, so the terms and definitions, is free to download. So that is the overarching standard, 27000, and then you've got all your other standards underneath. Hope that clarifies.
Thanks, Anna. Another one here. How will this standard harmonise with operational technology system standards?
So if the OT system standards are using an MSS, then great, you can follow the same. It follows the same structure, so those same clauses, which is great. You can apply them. If it doesn't, if the OT systems do not have a management system standard, then I think you can still use it, because it's not specific. It's as we explained, it's quite generic and applicable to all types of information. So in your OT environments, you can still apply these kinds of controls. Although I understand there's different focus in OT, so it's more of an availability attribute rather than a confidentiality thing. So I guess you got to review those. And there are quite a few ISO standards related to OT that can help with implementing information security in those areas, so that you're not alone.
Great. Thanks, Anna. There's one here. Is it best to apply 27001 together with COVID-5, as both address the management of IT risks?
So, I think you can choose whichever security standard you want to use. Security risks at the end of the day are going to be same, and then depending on what controls you want to apply, you can use 27002, you can use COVID-5, you can use other, even the ISM, you can use other standards that list controls. The good thing is that once you know your risk, so whether there is a risk to the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of information, then the types of controls you want to apply, you can get from any family of standards.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Question. I didn't see ISO 27017 and 27018 in the 27000 family slide. Are these standards still part of the updated family?
They are. So 27017, which is about controls for cloud services, and 27018, which is controls, so 27002 controls in public clouds acting as PI processes, so that's related to personal information. They're still part of it. I just didn't have space to put 64 standards listed. So yes, they're definitely around. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Anna. We've got one here. Hi, I'm a project manager involved in in a government project, and we have a cybersecurity management requirement. Our contractor is following 27001, but they're doing an assessment as per IEC 62443. What are the differences, and why do they need to adopt another standard to manage the cybersecurity?
So they may have identified a need. They may have other customers, and so they're like, well, this covers the majority of 27001 series, so that's why we've adopted it. If I remember correctly, is it 62443? Is that for OT?
I believe it is.
Best practices for cybersecurity. Yes, yeah. So yes, it's for industrial automation and control systems. So maybe that outsourcer, or maybe their contractor has a lot of clients that are in water or gas or electricity utilities, and so they follow their particular information security standard for those environments. It's going to be very similar. They may, you could probably question, why don't they adopt the, harmonized version of 27001, but they may be able to explain that there's additional controls that they've put in place to help you, to protect you even more. So you'd have to do a side by side to look at the differences between the two, hoping not too many.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Anna. Good question here, actually. What are the benefits of adopting 27001 if my organisation has its IT outsourced?
So the biggest piece of advice I can give you is, even if you outsource, it's still your information. So you still need to manage your information. So you can't outsource the accountability. So you're going to have to still consider the risks to that information and put in your risk register that you have outsourced it, and you're managing those risks with that, and put in extra controls to make sure it's protected. And also consider that it's not just your IT information, like, the electronic information. You may still have hard copy information, or you also need to think about conversations, so verbal information and how that's managed, and the risks to that. So it's not just for you don't just have to adopt 27001 for your electronic information. And if you saying that it's all outsourced, well, they can do it. It's more for the organisation to say we understand what our information is, where it is, i.e., it might be at an outsourcer, and the risks related to that to manage ongoing.
Great answer. Thank you, Anna. A question here about certification. So after we achieve 27001 certification, are we also required to certify to 27002?
So the 27001 is using 27002 Annex A. So, the Annex A in 27001 is 27002. So it is a one certification. So you're certified to 27001, and it is utilizing Annex A, which happens to be 27002. And 27002 is just a detailed explanation of Annex A. So it's the one certification, 27001, which is the management system standard for InfoSec. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna. It's a good one about Amendment 1 climate action. So when that is available, when they do amend 27001, will that be referred to as part of the 2023 edition?
Look, I think, George, you can probably help me out. I think that because it's going to be 2023 as the 27001, that was the original, and then it would be Amendment 1 2024 if it happens this year, correct?
Yeah, so that's a good point, and I guess a bit of a refresher as to the years of the edition. The international standard was published in 2022. Australia then adopted the international standard in 2023, and so if there is an Amendment 1, depending on the year, it's finalised.
Yeah.
It'll still fall. In fact, actually, at Standards Australia, we don't tend to put years. Oh, could be actually
An amendment.
yeah. It could be AS ISO IEC 27001 Amendment 1. But we still retain the 2023 because the original standard was published then. But I think to sort of answer that question, it won't be a totally new addition. It'll just be an Amendment 1 to the broader standard.
Yes, that's how I understand it. It's just going to be those two lines inserted and to say you read this in conjunction with the 27,001 2023.
Yep, correct. We've got another one here. How deep do you need to go to apply 27,001 across your supply chains and subcontractors?
Oh, look, securing the supply chain or supplier network, and sometimes it's not a chain. It's just, Anyway, it's your comfort level. Like, what information are you giving them? Are you giving them, some generic information that you can be a little bit more risky with? Are you giving them your crown jewels, in which case you may want to put more stringent clauses in your contracts and conduct more regular audits with the supply chain? And then you may say, look, no subcontracting, I just want to have one contractor. So I guess it's all going to depend on what your information is and the risk, your risk appetite and tolerance. So you're going to have to make those decisions as to how deep you go. It's all well and good to just do your the 27,001 according to your scope, which is, I know my information, it goes to this third party. I'm not going to go. I haven't authorized it to go any further, so I'm just going to put those gates around it. But I guess, I think you got to think about what else are they doing with your information. So always a challenge. It's a nice little area, and I think 27,036 talks about managing supplier relationships. So there is a standard with various parts on that. So it's probably worthwhile taking a look at things to consider and what to put in contract clauses and what to audit, and all that is quite helpful. It's got a good guide on that.
Great. Thanks, Anna. We've got another one here. How do we assess security controls or adequacy thereof when some of the applications are hosted on cloud?
Good question, and I'd like to know. It's hard, right? So, it goes to the point of what is the information that you're putting out there on the cloud, and I guess you can always say, oh, okay, I'm going to put this information out there, and I have to sign up to the default terms and conditions. So we're going to have to accept that risk. You can do some kind of control adequacy testing by, I guess, doing site audits or inspections, doing pen tests, doing some kind of reviews, having conversations with your third parties. That's always good to have those communications up, and, talking with them. But you're right. Sometimes, it's a bit of smoke and mirrors. They tell you one thing and you just accept it because that's what they said. You can't test it per se. I guess they're the risks we take with going to the cloud.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Anna. And one final question, probably one I can also assist on, is why do we actually adopt the Australian version when it's identical? Which is a really good question. I might start and maybe hand over to you,
please.
Anna.
No, you can take it away.
Yeah. The benefits of adopting international standards are that while the standard, and in this case 27,001, even though it was developed by an international committee with a really diverse group of countries and standards bodies from many different regions, and it is an international standard. By the very fact or by the virtue of adoption, we've actually made it an Australian standard. So we can now say that we actually have an Australian standard for information security management systems. It wasn't necessarily, it's not a native standard. It wasn't developed by Australian experts, although it kind of was. I believe no, Australia did in fact send delegations of cyber experts to many of these international standards meetings during the drafting of 27001. So in a way, when the international standard gets drafted, the hope is that there is a bit of an Australian flavour being sprinkled on the standard while it's being developed. But once it's adopted, it becomes an Australian standard. So we can say to government, to other countries, we've actually got an information security management system standard. It's ours, and the most important thing about that is it aligns with the rest of the world. We don't have a native standard that where we're not speaking the same language as our major trading partners and some of the countries in our region. We're all using that same sort of base language, which is 27001. So even though it is identical to the international standard, that AS you see on the title does make quite a big difference. And we are grateful for Anna and her fellow committee members who participate in standards for being able to review the international standards and adopt them in Australia where they are adequate. Anna, we definitely appreciate your work.
Thank you. Look, it's rewarding, and yeah, I enjoy it. So yes, I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you.
No, not a problem. And in fact, I think that's it for us. Thank you so much, Anna, for giving your time to standards and for your ongoing commitment, and for giving your time tonight. We've all learnt a lot this evening, so I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. We really enjoy these events. We enjoy putting them on, and we hope that you find them beneficial. So thank you again for your attendance, and enjoy your evenings. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.